Here we go. Are you ready? Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our call today. We've put together an advanced practitioner webinar for you discussing the topic of avoiding automation usage limits in both Jira Service Management and Jira. Get my slide deck going. Can you see my slide deck, Bill?
Yes.
All right. My name is Laura Walker. I'm your host today. I'm the Director of ITSM Advocacy at Stratacom. We've got a couple presenters, William Renfro, who is our Jira Service Management Practice Lead, and Greg Gerton, who is a Jira Service Management Senior Consultant on our staff. For anyone who may be unfamiliar with Stratacom, we were founded in 1997, and IT service management is always what we've done from the beginning. We've had a lot of large enterprise clients we've implemented, configured for through the years. We've got a wealth of expertise on our staff. We've got a large team from coast to coast across the US who does our projects, and collectively they've got many decades of ITSM expertise. As far as Atlassian products, we work with all the product lines across Atlassian and basically provide any and all services from process consulting to implementations, upgrades, ongoing managed support services, and so forth. If we can ever assist you and your team with any projects, please let us know. For today's presentation, we put together, we're starting this series we like to call Advanced Practitioner. So it's really a technical deep dive into some of the Atlassian products. We have our technical experts on the call who are going to talk through lessons learned, things they've discovered, tips and tricks that might be helpful to you and your team. So I'd encourage you to keep an eye out for those webinars coming in the future, invite your teams to join, so forth. We will be recording this session, so if you'd like to rewatch any of the information or send it on to any team members and colleagues, you're more than welcome to do so. We also like to keep these interactive, so if you come up with questions throughout the presentation, I'd invite you to put those questions into the chat, or you can use the raise your hand feature to visit with our team live for your questions as well. With that, let's get going with today's presentation. I'd like to turn it over to Bill.
All right, I'm turning on my camera. Laura, if you stop sharing, I'll start sharing here in a minute.
Okay.
But there's always the question, like, why do we do this? Why are we having this? And it's not a hypothetical. So on March 6th of this year, one of our customers called us in a panic saying they'd gotten a scary email that they were out of automation runs for the month. This is a Jira Service Management Premium customer, but they also had Jira Software Standard. And of course, we'd been doing their implementation of Jira Service Management, so we, a little bit panicky, went and looked at the customer site, and it turned out they'd run out of Jira Software automation runs. And once that happens, you're done for the month. There is no way other than buying additional tiers of the product to get more. Jira Software Standard has 1,400 automation runs a month, period. We'll get into all that later. And that is all you get. So we went in and looked at the customers' automations, and they were frankly sloppy. But the reality is a lot of people who are Jira admins do it as like 10, maybe 30% of their job, and they're doing other things, and they just don't know the kind of things that we're going to go through on this webinar today. So that's what sparked this. And when we build, and I know there's multiple of our customers in here, but when we build things for customers, we always try to be really cognizant of the fact that somebody will have to maintain this when we are gone, and that there are limits. And even if you are an enterprise which has an unlimited number of automation runs for whatever product you're on, you can still get throttled if your automations are sloppy. And so we're going to go through some of that. And because I use a 4K monitor on this computer I'm on right now, I'm actually going to turn off my camera and just flip over to my laptop, which is right behind me. So I'm just going to start out with a couple things. So I've got this Teams toolbar is the worst. It always goes to the exact worst spot on your screen. We have an automation best practices thing Laura is going to send after this is over, as well as a cheat sheet, right? And so I'm going to go through some of this stuff. Greg, who is on with me, is going to go through some of this stuff as well. But let's just start with our best practices, just theoretical, and then we're going to get in and look at some of these. So first of all, we do see times when people are trying to create automations and they write them too broadly and they don't really know what they're trying to do. And so step one is like any other part of a project ever, just make sure you define what you need to do and what you're trying to do. And then secondly, the templates, these actually are really good. I was shocked initially when I started using the templates and I started using the AI to create things. And I want to give you an example, actually. So let's go look at something that I do in demos. And this is a very easy to understand kind of use case. Now, maybe some of you are using the virtual agent, maybe some of you are not. A thing that I demo in when we do just JSM demos is a use case where a person needs help with their insurance and we attach whatever the correct form is, right? So a very simple use case. I go in here and I say, I need to change my insurance. In the background, the virtual agent is looking at the workflow we've generated, and it's now going to ask me, do I need to change the insurance? I'll say yes. And then depending on which one of these I wanted to choose, I'll do add family member. I have an automation on the back end that is going to attach a form to my request. And that's like kind of next level stuff. And when I was creating this, I have to go to the right tab, obviously. When I was creating this, I actually messed up. I couldn't get it to work. And I went back in here and I said, well, maybe if I use a template or I use AI, it'll work. And so this is what I had actually put in originally. So, you have these templates, but the AI, I thought that I was looking for the issue comments to have the the add family member phrase in there. And that is not actually how it works. I was wrong. So this AI is smart enough when it's creating this automation, if I hit preview a rule here, that it's going to look at what I'm trying to do and it knows the data structures. And it's going to say, actually, you wanted comment.body. And this is smarter than I was that day. And so what actually then ended up happening is I created this rule using the AI help that does some if thens and then attaches forms. And so this just automates what happens with the customer. They get the right form right away, they can fill it out, and then HR can process that, right? So that's when we look at these best practices, I really do encourage you to try the templates and the AI. And then though the comments.body and the issue.comments are of course what we call smart triggers and smart values. And that's something that throws our customers too. Like, how do you know what all of these things are, right? When we talk about, if I go back to that example, when I look at this comment.body is like one of many possible values inside an issue. And if we really look at the contents of any issue, this is essentially just a giant JSON array. And it exists in here. And one of the first things I do when working with customers is give myself the ability to see every value in here. And now in this cheat sheet, Greg is going to go through these couple of points near the end, but there is a way to see all of the values inside any issue in Jira or Jira Service Management by using this little command. And the way that I utilize it is actually in an automation. And then I can use this to work through all of my automations. So what I have out here is I have an automation called expand names. This is only visible to administrators, and all it does is add a comment to my issue. And that comment, get that out of the way, is just this URL, which then gives me the entire package of the current issue I'm on. And so you can know if you're looking for, first name, that's actually custom field, yada, yada, and you can use that in your queries, right? And so this will be in the cheat sheet. But at that point, I wasn't sure which order to put all this in. So if there's questions or if I'm confusing people, this will be in the handout. But let's go back to a more simple kind of overview of how things have been that we've seen in the real world. So I created an automations project. This was completely just for this webinar. It's basically kind of throwaway. It's not something that we would, we don't generally speaking show customer stuff. So I've recreated what we've seen in customer things. So I'm going to go back to the project settings here. And something went wrong. That's interesting. I don't know what happened there, and I don't know if Atlassian has any issues right now, but it seems to have resolved itself. So it might have just been goofy internet. And if I go to automation in here, you can see I've got several automations in here. And the thing that the customer ran into on the 6th of March was that they were running 9 automations that ran against every single issue that was created or edited, right? And it was something similar to this. Like every single time an issue was created, they would edit this. And now that resulted in them running out of automation runs. And so you would never want to do something like this. You would want to be much more restrictive. And so the simple solution to that is, of course, just adding really specific if conditions. So you can do an issue fields condition. You can say, request type we'll just pick randomly, get IT help. So now it will only run for that specific kind of request type. And you've cut it down to probably 10% of the runs it was running before. I don't actually want to save that. Another one is similar. We've seen this, and we've seen this mostly with like change requests, where every time something was transitioned to a new status, they wanted to add a comment. And it was the same kind of thing. Even though this exists in the work history, they will still want it as a separate comment because of how their audit rules were. So again, we would just restrict this in real life and make it, only on change requests or, problem tickets or some set of a much smaller set of tickets to run against. I mentioned throttling earlier. If you have an automation that runs, and Atlassian has never published an official number, so we only know through our own experimentation. But I believe if you have an automation that runs for more than 40 seconds, and you're probably thinking, wow, that seems bad. But we have seen them. You can have an automation that does multiple lookups and then creates related tickets and does notifications and such. They will still get throttled, even on enterprise. And one of the ways that you can make things last a long time is refetches. A refetch is sometimes necessary. I have in the cheat sheet a link to when it's necessary, so you can look that up on your own. But in general, you would like to avoid these as much as possible. And so if you think you need one of these, I would test it both ways. And so in this case, I'm going to talk through 2 actual situations that could happen. First of all, this one is always unnecessary. If you're not doing anything after this, you would not want one at the end. This one possibly could be necessary. And the reason that happens is right in this step. If I edit something, I could cause a cascading series of steps to happen. This step could cause another automation to run, possibly. And then it would update the ticket. And at this point, the ticket is just existing in memory. It is not checking it again when it gets to here, unless you refetch. So if you have something acting wonky, I would test it with a refetch, and I would test it without a refetch. They are absolutely necessary sometimes, but extra ones or unnecessary ones that you haven't tested to make sure they need to be there, you want to get rid of, because that adds somewhere between 3 to 7 seconds, depending on the complexity of your request. So those are good examples coming out of the customer world. But from a best practices standpoint, if you look at the Atlassian rules around what is an actual action, right? Like we said, you get a certain number of automation runs per month. But what is an automation run? If we look at projects here, I'm just going to go to another one that I know has what I'm looking for. So if I look at an IT service management project out of the box, there are, in theory, I'll just go to global automation. So there are system rules that exist out there. A system rule does not count against your automation limit if it runs. Important to note, it doesn't matter how many things an automation does, it still counts as one run. So if I go back to my automation project, I'll show you what we typically do with customers. I know there's multiple people on here where we have done this. So a good practice is to have, like, if you want to do multiple things on create, put it all in one automation as much as you can. Now you're limited to 65 of these blocks in an automation. So we have hit the limit before where we had to break it up into separate automations. But you'll notice I'm only running this for service requests. It has a different one for incident. And then you may or may not be familiar with branches. So a branch is just one of the types of elements you have in the automation editor. And so this branch is just going to run for the current issue. And if it's a VIP ticket, it's going to assign it to a certain team. These branches are not mutually exclusive. They can be doing multiple things for the same ticket, right? And so this could be a VIP ticket, but it also could be an onboarding ticket. And in this case, for onboarding tickets, it creates some subtasks to do onboarding tasks, right? So summary in here. This layout has changed. These tasks are actually say things like add hardware, get a desk, etc. But I don't know if the new layout changed. But my point being, if both of these branches happened and they happen to both process, there's two separate actions happening where it creates 4 tasks. And so there's like multiple things that are performed. It still only counts as one automation count. Let's go look at some more examples. Now this is an incident, right? So we'd run this against just incidents. And let's say it's a critical priority that came in. Then I can send an email off to JSM alerts and create an alert, which is something a lot of people don't know you can do. And it'll tie it back to this incident. And then I can automatically make it a major incident if I want to. And then in this case, this is a mutually exclusive branch. So when it's not critical, then we just edit it and attach it to tier 1 support. Now, you should know something about branching. This is not linear. The automation engine is multi-threaded. It will process these branches at the same time sometimes. So if you need things to happen in a certain order, you either have to put them after the branching or you need to have them in order within a branch, or possibly sometimes a separate automation. You just have to be aware of what the automation limit is, and you should be checking that. Greg's going to go through the actual statistics part of this in a few minutes. And then I'm going to go back to the rules. So here's another example of doing these linear things. This one's a little longer. So for emailed requests, I attach the form for IT support requests, and then I send it back to pending, waiting for the customer for more info. I use this example because we're actually doing this with a customer right now. They have a huge dependency on emails as the major method of intake for tickets. Like 80% of their tickets are coming in this way, and they want to change that. And so this is a bit of a Pavlovian experiment we're running to see if we force people to go back to the portal to fill out the form, maybe they'll just start there in the future. So that's like a 1-month test they're running. I haven't checked in on it lately, but it's one of the many options you have. Now another branch in here, just assigns, if it's a onboard new employee, it's similar to the other one, it creates 3 tasks and assigns it to a certain team. And this is kind of similar. Again, if it's a VIP, it assigns it to a certain other team. Then for changes, if the request type is empty, it would, change it to a standard request to change. I'm going to go back to my list of best practices. So you did see me go to global automation, which is located under this. You can make automations that span multiple projects. And in fact, that one that I showed you up front to get all the JSON elements is one of those. So this is a manually triggered. As I said, it's only available to people who are in the admin group. And as you can see, this is global. You want to create global rules very sparingly because they can have unintended consequences. You can limit the scope, so it could be specific projects. So that's better. In this case, this is only available to administrators, so I don't really care that much. But best practice is basically considered leave it in one project unless it's something that's going to be common across multiple projects. Then assign it to multiple projects instead of global. If you are going to do a global, then try to limit who can run it. You just want to keep the automation runs down, and you don't want to mess up the when people are in their project, right? The stuff that shows up in this actions menu when you're in an issue, you don't want this to be super long. It just can get a little bit too confusing for people. So these are a couple that only show up for admins in this instance. All right.
Hey, on this real quick, if you could jump back to that ticket.
Yes.
Scroll down on the bottom right and then show the automation there and hit refresh. And just a heads up for everybody. I mean, I'm probably common knowledge, but if it's gray here, it does not count against it. If it's green here, it's counting against you. Easy way to tell too, based on what you're trying to monitor or troubleshoot.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into the audit log on these, when you see no actions performed, it means it did not count against your thing. And the no actions performed usually means it hit that if at the beginning and it didn't match. So that's the most common reason for that. All right, go back to the best practices list. Minimize rule overlap. I think that's self-explanatory. Greg's going to talk about number 6 here in a minute as far as monitoring this, like as an admin of the system or for your admins, if it's not you, they should, once, twice a month be going in and looking. This is something we take a very close look at when we first start a go live with a customer, just to make sure we know where we're at. It's pretty typical to use, I'd say 25% of your runs a month. With JSM Premium, you get 1,000 runs per agent per month, which sounds like a lot, but we've seen people run out or come very close to running out. And that's a lot of the time where we'll go in and clean up whatever. Number 7, use smart values. That was something I showed you up front. And you can see these using the link that will be in my cheat sheet, which Laura will send out later right here. The performance issues, Greg will kind of talk about this too, because you can see that in what he's going to show you. But the branches and looping conditions are, I would say, use branches a lot, but the looping conditions you do have to watch out for, because an automation can trigger another automation. You may or may not know that, but when you're in here and you look at the rule details, if you check this box, this automation can be triggered by another automation. And that's where things can also spiral out of control. You can get throttled even in enterprise. So 9 and 10 are pretty self-explanatory. Test your stuff, check the performance in the performance tabs and usage, and then document your stuff. I know nobody loves documenting. I'm probably the worst offender with that. I don't like to do it, but I force myself to do it when it's necessary. And a lot of the time, the best documentation for these isn't even really like a complete, Confluence article or whatever. It's actually going in here and using things like, when you look at the list, putting labels on these. So, you just say disabled, bad performance, or whatever other kind of way you want to do it. You can put comments in the thing itself, but that's, my preference. Everybody's a little bit different. All right, one last thing I want to show you that you may or may not know. So when I look at that, I'm going to look at my expand names automation again. And let's say I was troubleshooting an automation and I wanted to see the value of one of those JSON things in the process, and I didn't know what it was. I can actually do this. I can add a log action, and we use this all the time, troubleshooting. And my message that I want to put in the audit log, this creates an entry in the audit log, and this is in the cheat sheet as well, and this was not well documented when we first started working with Atlassian. Maybe it is now, but you can do a debug. So it's pound debug, pound debug, my bad. I swear, typing during demos is the worst idea for me, so my apologies. And then I can put any of a smart value or an issue element. So I'm just going to do, I'll do issue dot description, and then a closer for the debug. It's just one of those. And now that'll just put that value into my audit log, and I'll be able to see it in real time while the automation is running. So here in any particular thing, I can go back to my actions menu. I'm going to refresh this page actually. I'm going to run my expand names that I just altered. So it should add a comment. And then in the audit log for that rule, when I go look at this audit log, I would expect to see, so this was successful. And then this audit log, you can see it logged the description that was in there. So that is a very handy tool for debugging automations. I literally use it probably in every project I've worked on because there are so many different values in the issues, and they change frequently depending on where the ticket is at in its life cycle. And sometimes we're trying to do things like math, right? Like we're trying to add together 3 fields, and maybe it's not working, and this shows us the value of those fields. And there's even a little quirk sometimes where certain date fields don't like each other's formats, and you can figure it out that way. So that log action, very, very useful. And of course, very easy to remove. Once you're done, you can just go in here and get rid of it and update your rule. And that's the overview of the best practices for now, trying to keep this high level, but Greg is going to show you, okay, so how do I actually know how many I'm using and what are my monthly limits and where am I at and how do I tell which automation is causing me problems?
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. All right, so my section is going to be very simple and quick. However, it's stuff that I think most of you will use probably pretty regularly. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and then I'm going to start here with my screen, but then from there I'm going to go to some images that I pulled from a customer's environment to actually show you a real world scenario that we can talk through. So this list right here, I have this loaded. This does take a while to load. I'll show you exactly where it is. But you can go through here and look at the top and you have execution count, you have a total duration, and you have an average duration. Now these are the key metrics that Atlassian is monitoring is the number count, which is what Bill had mentioned earlier. So like, for example, you had 200 licenses, you had 200,000 runs a month. But then you also have a total duration. And this is one that's a less known, at least it was to me, a less known metric. I know that there was a duration, but the actual metric, as I have been told, is 60 minutes of runtime across 12 hours per automation. So if one of these automations was to go over 60 minutes of runtime over 12 hours, it would then become throttled. And it's that automation that becomes throttled, not another automation. There are workarounds to stuff like this. If you run into issues, it's not something where you can't do anything, but it is a very difficult issue to work around. So like, for example, if your automation was being throttled, you could clone the automation and start up another version of it. And that one is not throttled, but your still underlying problem is still there. And the ones that are throttled will not re-trigger, right? It would just fix the problem from there going forward. So it's something to be aware of. I have never seen an automation. I only know of one instance where it cleared 60 minutes in 12 hours. So it's not a common problem to run into, but it's one that as a developer or as an admin, you just have to be aware of. The overall count is over the month period. So this is kind of deceiving because on this metric, you're looking at a 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. But if I go back to the beginning list here and you were to go to usage, this one is current month's usage, and this is the number they track for your 1 month. So for that is where you're going to keep track of your number being counted for that month.
Yeah, I don't think I explicitly said this, but it's not a rolling like 30 days. It's from the first of the month through the end of the month that Atlassian will turn it on or turn it off if you go over.
Correct. So it's good to know the rules because once you know the rules, it's a lot easier to play by them, right? So that rule will count. And to get to the list of where I was or that graph, you hit the 3 dots. I'm in automations right now, so I just went into my project settings and I came down to automations, and then over here I hit the ellipsis and I hit view performance insights, and this will bring you right into that chart. So I would definitely recommend that everybody who hasn't been looking at this start monitoring this chart because it'll give you some great detail about where you're at and what is going on with your environment. And you may find that you are not in any concern for this, and many of you, if not most of you, probably will. But it's something that we're just trying to make sure that everybody's aware of. So I'm going to stop sharing because I had a similar situation as Bill with the 4K. I'm going to share another window here. Let's see here. Okay, so you're able to see another chart, right, Bill?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this chart is something I pulled from so it's got real numbers in here. So it's something we can actually talk through. So here you can look at my incident create actions on this customer is obviously the highest count. And you can see that it executed 8,200 times. And then you can see the total duration. So again, that total duration, it may seem really large on this, But in reality, when you look at the total of 60 minutes over 12 hours, it's not that. We're looking at a total of 1 month in, I think is that seconds or minutes? I'm not even sure, to tell you the truth. So it ends up being a situation where we're not in an issue, but I will show the average duration one next, and that'll show you a little bit more. It does give you a little bit more of a clue of some other things that are going on too, though, when you see the success, no action, some errors, and you can see that none of them have been throttled, right? So that's a very beneficial number to know. And then if I go to, I'm gonna just hit the arrow. There we go. So this one is basically the same chart, and the difference here is I'm sorted by average duration. So here you can see that the one that is the biggest offender here, well, that makes sense. I'm creating tasks based on the type of incident or request. So for this customer, we have a template system. So based on the request type that's submitted, we're choosing a group of tasks that are executing. Well, that process takes 80 seconds to run on average, which to me was a little worrisome, because I think Bill had mentioned earlier, we had heard that some issues happened around that 45 second timeline. And in practice, this customer has not seen that. But knowing the numbers from a duration perspective of 60 minutes across 12 hours, the count of 260 running over an entire month, obviously we're nowhere near those types of numbers. So it just shows you kind of, again, it can reaffirm that you're just fine, where some customers sometimes can get a little worried about these numbers. So, but you have to take and use some good development skills while building out your environment to make sure that you don't accidentally end up in a position you don't want to. So that is the total of what I have, Bill. So I'm going to pass that back to you.
All right, I'm going to share one final thing, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. So I just have to go back to my team window and share. All right, so what Greg just showed you was in the project settings. If you go to the gear in here, assuming you're an admin, and you go to system, and you go to global automation, you can see the same thing across the board. I'm not going to open this because it takes a while to refresh. And we looked at the audit log before, right? We've got all of our things, but the usage tab will show you your instant usage for the month. So you can tell me, you can see this resets on May 1st. This is a demo instance where I have enterprise licenses, so I'm using a very tiny fraction of the number, right? So you can see there's been this, but this is probably your quickest, fastest place to go see where you're at for the month overall across all projects. And you can see then that you see the total number of runs you have. And Atlassian has split this up by product. So the customer I started telling you about, did have Jira Service Management Premium, but Jira Software was standard, and that is a hard limit of 1,400 runs a month. So that is why they ran out. So these three products are all separate. If you're running an asset-based automation, it counts against the Jira Service Management ones. So we do have some customers that have done that. But really, that is about it. So the biggest takeaway, I think, always is try to consolidate as many actions into one automation as you can. That's been the thing that seems to work best for the customers we've worked with. And if you have questions or if you've run into interesting things, let's hear them. You can throw them at us right now. Flip back to the window. I don't know if there's anything in the chat or in the Q&A.
I don't see anything in the chat yet, so I would like to go ahead and share out a slide with our contact information. If you'd like to get in touch with Stratacom with questions you might have, anything we can do to help you, please let us know. My contact information is right here, phone or email. We're happy to help. I don't see any questions coming in, so I'm going to leave the line open for about 1 more minute here. So if you do have any questions or would like to discuss anything, please enter those now before we hang up the call. I'd also like to put a call for topics. If there's topics you'd like to hear more about for Jira Service Management that might make a good future advanced practitioner call, I'd love to hear from you. We're always trying to think of what topics are of interest to our customers. Where is there confusion? Where can we provide clarity? So if you have any insights there, you can put them into the chat here, or you're welcome to send them to me via email at the address here as well. All right, well, I don't see anything coming in, so I'm going to assume that's a wrap for today. Again, we are going to be sending this recording out to everybody.
Wait,
Feel free to rewatch and
there
share.
is something in the Q&A that just came in.
Oh, I'm not seeing it. Fire away if you cut it up there.
Yeah, so the question is, do you have any recommendations for modifying large amounts of issues, programmatically, not automation? Yeah, when we do this, we almost always use the API. That seems to be the best way to do it. And I'll give you an example use case. Quite often, so we worked with shareable customers quite a bit in the past. That product is now end of life. And so one of the things that has happened is we've been migrating shareable customers to Jira Service Management and bringing over all their tickets, or sometimes just parts of their tickets. And the process of modifying and the process of creating tickets is essentially the same. It's just slightly different structure in the API call. So when we bring over, 100,000 tickets, we do get limited. There is some limit in the API. And so what Atlassian didn't tell anybody is that you can run multiple queries at the same time with the API. So we'll usually run them in batches. And so I don't know what your definition of large is, but would typically, when we're talking like tens of thousands of records, we always use the API. Greg, do you have anything to add to that?
Just one. So I definitely would say that API and PowerShell scripts is for the one-time use, definitely the way to go. From an automation perspective, to kind of tie this back to what we did here on this call today, one way to limit your automations but still get a lot of records updated is to schedule that automation and then run it against a query. So if you can do that, it counts as one automation, even though you're updating many records. But that's only practical for a certain number. At some point, it just becomes too much, and then you're back to the other limitations again of time and other things. So
I'm curious if you have a quantity that was Brooke Hughes Bronner, I believe it's how it's pronounced. So do you have like a quantity you're trying, like what kind of quantity are we talking about? So the comments, so 20,000 issues. Yeah. So that's not uncommon. We've run into that.
I would do PowerShell for that. So, or the API.
If you have follow-up questions, like how you actually do that, just shoot us an email and Laura will get us in touch and we can talk. So, okay, I don't see any other questions out there. So I'm going to say thank you for everyone for taking time today. I hope at least part of this, if not all of it, was beneficial. Laura will send out the 2 Confluence articles I referenced with best practices and a cheat sheet after the meeting is over. And that is all I have for today.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you on the next one. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.